Let's go.
What if I told you that you've been playing Frank wrong this entire time? This video features the best tips and tricks to help you play the good-natured giant Frank. Alright, so to start off this guy, let's go to talk about Frank's main attack, Hammer Hit. Frank swings his hammer on the ground, sending a shockwave that pierces multiple enemies. Frank is a very fast reload speed and has a large attack delay for 1.3 seconds when he has full health, but the delay decreases as his health gets lower. Now, obviously, Frank has a lot of potential with his high damage, but he also has a pretty slow unload speed, and that makes him pretty immobile. What I mean by this is that Frank won't be able to effectively chase down his enemies. Because of this, you also shouldn't attack an enemy if you're in danger of dying and running away from the enemy. To deal damage to an enemy without making yourself vulnerable, try to ambush them one-on-one from the bushes so they won't have much time to react. Now, Frank can also be pretty effective against sharpshooters as long as you can dodge his way and get closer to them. Frank can use his high health to tank shots to close down the gap and get closer, but also if you can dodge shots and cause the enemies to waste their ammo, that's even better. Mostly because the sharpshooters in the game won't ever be able to deal enough damage to take Frank down since their DPS is low, their reload speed is slow, or their health is low too. But where Frank is really going to shine is against other short-range brawlers or just tanks and assassins in general. This is due to the fact that he deals high damage to the close-range brawlers because they need to maintain point-blank range of him in order to damage him. So if there are high bursting brawlers, then you can just spam your auto aim to increase that reload speed as your health drops to quickly defeat the enemy. Now, brawlers that have a shorter attack range than Frank should always be kept at arm's length. Even though Frank got his rework and that's extremely good for Frank, he still needs to get within range of the enemies to put his rework to use. Use obstacles to hide and then run out to chase down the enemies so they are hopefully within range now, but most importantly, use bushes to sneak up onto the enemies so you can surprise them and get within range with ease. Now, the good thing about Frank's main attack is that it can pierce through multiple targets. Since Frank's attacks can pierce, you want to get the most amount of value out of each attack to make charging up his super easier, but also be very ammo efficient. This can be useful to lower down the enemies even quicker and to just punish them for grouping up in the first place. But okay, that's gonna be for Frank's main attack. Let's go and talk about his super stunning blow. Frank swings his hammer on the ground, sending a larger shockwave that destroys obstacles and stuns enemies for 2 seconds, rendering them completely vulnerable to fire at the expense of his super having a larger delay than his attack. Just like his attack, Frank is immobile while performing his super, and if hit with a stun pull or knockback during the larger delay, his super will be cancelled. Now, since Frank is a tank, he also has the tank trait which can help him charge up his super. If Frank is close to charging up his super, he can tank shots from the enemies and get his super while he is within range of the enemies to surprise them. The enemies won't see it coming, and this will allow the enemies to have less time to escape Frank's range in time before his super lands onto them. Now, a huge rookie mistake I see with a lot of new Frank players is they use their super and they have no ammo left in order to burst down that enemy. Since the enemy will be stunned, they can't provide any counterfire whatsoever. This is where saving ammo becomes extremely important because you need to capitalize as best as possible during those 2 seconds the enemies are stunned. Now, another mistake I see with a lot of new Frank players too is that right as they get their super, they just go ahead and use it. Like, no, you gotta be patient with Frank's super. Frank's average range and poor mobility means that he works best on maps with lots of walls, so using his super too much may result in him having a much harder time landing attacks. This is especially important in Brawl Ball, as opening up the map can make it much easier for the enemy team to score. Now, let's say there's an enemy hiding behind a wall or an obstacle trying to heal up or hide from you. Just go ahead and use your super and hit them through that wall. The super deals sufficient damage while stunning the enemy, and it also destroys the obstacle, rendering it completely useless to the enemies in the future. This also gives Frank some protection, so the enemies will have a harder time interrupting his super with a wall dividing him and the enemy. Now, yes, in some scenarios it's going to be good to destroy walls and expose brawlers, but you also don't want to be destroying walls at the same time in other scenarios. Since Frank needs obstacles and bushes to get closer to the enemies, as I stated in previous tips, you don't want to break the one thing that can help Frank get within range of the enemies. The one time it might be okay is if you're playing against throwers that are being a pest hiding behind walls, then of course you would want to destroy the walls so the throwers will be exposed. Now, the biggest con about playing Frank and using his super is that most of the brawlers in the game have some sort of ability that can cancel his super. If you can bait out the enemy's gadgets, super, or attacks in general to decrease your chances of getting your super interrupted, that would be highly recommended. grinded. Even though Frank's supercharge rate threshold isn't that difficult to achieve, you still don't want to be wasting it because it's such an important part to his kit. Now before we continue with today's video, this portion of today's video is sponsored by C2 Grips. C2 Grips makes the best controller grips that can slide directly onto your PlayStation or Xbox controllers. They have an enlarged texture for the palm section and a smoother texture for the fingers and thumb grips, always ensuring ultimate comfort and accuracy while gaming. I personally love using them while I'm playing on my PS4 during my free time, and these have truly changed the way I play games now. So make sure it's going to go down in the description below. Go ahead and click on the link, check out C2 Grips, and thank you again C2 Grips for sponsoring today's portion of this video. But okay, that's gonna be for Frank's super. Let's go ahead and talk about his gadgets now. But the first one I want to talk about is gonna be active noise cancelling. Upon activation, Frank becomes immune to stuns, slows, and knockbacks, cancelling the effect for 1.5 seconds. Now this gadget can catch so much people off guard because it's paired very well with his super. Enemies that will try to interrupt Frank's super will not be able to interrupt it for the next 1.5 seconds and will probably get stunned by Frank's super as long as they're within range. I'd recommend using the gadget preemptively if you are going up against a brawler that has some type of ability that could potentially stop your super. However, just using this gadget in general when playing against brawlers that have knockback, stuns, or pulls, I mean, it's going to be great in those scenarios as well. This gadget can come up clutch when needing to score goals in Brawl Ball because there's nothing the enemy will be able to do besides kill you if they want to stop you from scoring. Just in general though, like if you need to close down the distance between the enemies or push back up the map for control, this gadget can be extremely helpful to help you accomplish whatever you are trying to achieve in the match. But okay, that's gonna be for his first gadget. Let's go and talk about his second gadget, Irresistible Attraction. Upon activation, Frank's next attack deals double the damage and pulls any enemies it hits towards him. This will end up cancelling any attacks and supers from the enemies. I personally love using this gadget over his other gadget because it helps you pull in those enemies to prevent them from escaping your main attack range. If you can miraculously pull an enemy that is far away from you to be closer to you, not only going to be dealing that extra damage, but it is going to make it even more difficult for the enemies to escape your main attacks. I'd recommend using the gadget right before you plan on yanking somebody to surprise them and give the enemies less time to react in case they try and make an escape. Now this gadget is a great way to interrupt other brawlers' abilities since it kind of acts like a pull. If you are playing a game mode like Brawl Ball, Frank can use this gadget to cause the enemies to drop the ball and prevent them from scoring. It can be a great way to just frustrate the enemies and get extra value out of the gadget. Now what's pretty funny about this gadget is you can get quite a bit of kills on people that are not even like close to dying. Since the gadget will deal double the damage along with pulling the enemy closer to you, if you have an enemy that's pretty weak, then this gadget will help you finish the enemy even quicker for an easy confirmed kill. Now when using this gadget, I always tell people to try and pull multiple people to just get the most amount of value out of the gadget. As long as you aren't pulling in multiple high bursting damage dealers, then Frank should have enough health to burst down more than one brawler when pulling them in. As with anything in Brawl Stars, getting as much value out of your gadgets is so critical since you only have a limited amount of gadgets to use throughout the match. But okay, that's going to be it for his gadgets. Let's go to talk about his star powers, but the first one I want to talk about is going to be Power Grab. After defeating an enemy brawler, Frank glows purple and his damage is increased by 50% for 12 seconds. If he defeats another enemy while it's active, the effect doesn't stack, but the duration is reset. Now as you can imagine, this star power is going to be so strong, especially when paired up with his gadget Irresistible Attraction. You can use the gadget to pull people in, get that kill, and then kick the star power into effect to get that increased damage. To make it even better, you can have the star power activated prior and then use the Irresistible Attraction gadget to deal the 50% extra damage plus the double damage from the main attack. I mean, it's a devastating combination. Power Grab in general, just having that Frank glow purple is a great way to cause the enemies to be pressured and play back. Since the enemies won't want to take the additional 50% extra damage, this will cause the enemies to play more passive and possibly give up control of the map with Frank not really doing much. Now unfortunately, as I stated earlier, a con with this star power is that even though the damage doesn't stack, at least the duration does reset. Now you obviously want the star power to be active as long as possible, right? So try and get another kill within those 12 seconds the star power is active so that you are constantly getting that extra damage buff and get kills even faster. But okay, that's gonna be for Frank's first star power. Let's go and talk about his second star power, Sponge. With Sponge, Frank gains 1400 additional health for the full duration of the match. Now this star power is pretty self-explanatory because all it does is just increase Frank's health. There's not really a whole ton of tips for this star power because it is just a simple stat change that doesn't change Frank's mechanics or kit in a technical way. The only thing I do want to say is that this star power is good to help Frank stay alive longer because of the extra health. But if you think about it, this can also be bad because the longer Frank stays alive, Frank could potentially be feeding the enemies their supers, which is clearly not good. I'd recommend just going for Power Grab because at least you get that additional damage for every kill. Frank already has the most health in the game. He doesn't necessarily they need more health. But obviously the rework has helped Frank in this meta so much, but something that's also helped him is his Hypercharge Seismic Smash. When activated, Frank's super hits all enemies and the environment around him. The radius of the shockwave is slightly shorter than his normal super range. He also gains a 26% speed boost, a 5% damage boost, and a 25% shield boost. Now, like I said, the rework plus the Hypercharge, I mean, that is what's helping Frank take the game by storm. With Frank being able to fire his super from all directions in a huge radius, it helps with keeping the enemies far away from him first off, but secondly, it's hard for enemies to escape its range once they are within it. Also, considering that the Hypercharge charge rate isn't extremely difficult to achieve unlike Miko or Angelo, it makes getting it and using it even more game breaking. And of course, we can't forget all the stat buffs that Frank gets with the Hypercharge, and that helps him drastically. Frank with the increased speed boost will be able to run towards the enemy even if he misses his super or doesn't use it at all. And of course, getting this shield boost will just make it even tougher to take Frank down, making it seem like Frank is closer to 20,000 health. So the build I suggest you guys use with Frank is going to be the Irresistible Attraction gadget, the Power Grab Star Power. There's actually a bunch of different gears you can run, so the first one I want to talk about is going to be the damage gear, mostly because of the rework. Like, you get that additional attack speed, the lower health you are, the damage gear kicking in, it's going to help you guys defeat so many enemies. You can also run the health gear because since Frank does have a ton of health, he could use the health gear to help him just get that health back a lot quicker. Also, by using the speed gear on bushy maps, that's going to help him get closer to the enemies so you can actually hit people with his attacks. You can also run the gadget charge gear as well because both gadgets have their pros and cons, and they're both really good that help Frank, so you could run gadget charge. And then of course go ahead and use his Hypercharge because it's very fun to use and it's pretty strong as well. Well, anyway guys, if you guys enjoyed that brawler guide, I highly recommend you go check out this brawler guide right here.